We are beginning Unit 4, and in Unit 4 we are going to be talking about finding the slope of a line. The first thing I need everyone to do is at the top of your paper, I need you to write slope, how steep a line is. Slope does not have anything to do with the length of a line. It talks about how steep it is, like the slope of a mountain or the slope of a roof. Okay? So, in previous grades, when you were finding slope, they taught you to use the method of finding rise over run. And that works great on a graph. However, in 8th grade, we have to find slope in 2 other ways, which include finding the slope of a table of information and finding the slope of 2 points. So, in 8th grade, we use a formula, and that is change in y over change in x. So the slope formula, what you used to call rise over run, is actually delta y, delta x. The triangle is a Greek symbol for delta, or change in. Change in y over change in x. We show this by subtracting our first y value minus our second y value over our first x value minus our second x value. Okay, so now you're thinking, what does this mean? So when we're looking at a table, you have x values on the left side and y values on the right side. And as a refresher, the x values and y values in a table are actually sets of points. The point here is 0, 5. This point here is 1, 10. The next point is 2, 15. We have 3, 20. And we have 4, 25. These are sets of points along a line. So the way we will use the formula in this case will be to pick 2 points and plug them into our formula. So for this instance, I'm just going to pick the top 2 points here. This is going to be my point number 1, and this will be my point number 2. Okay, so you're going to pick 2 points. And use the formula. And that formula again is your first y minus your second y over your first x minus your second x. Now, it's important that you pair them correctly. It's important that the numbers from the same point that you've picked are standing on top of each other. Otherwise, you'll be finding the slope of a different line. So in this case, my first point is this 0, 5. So I'm going to start with the y value, the first y value, and I'm going to have 5 minus the second y value, because this is the second point, 10. And I'm going to put that over my first x value, 0, minus my second x value, 1. And then you will subtract straight across. 5 minus 10 is negative 5. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And then we will simplify this. And when you have a negative divided by a negative, it's always positive. So we have 5 over 1, or 5, as our slope. Okay. This works the same when you're working with a set of graphed numbers. You can use this same method. In the past, you've counted the number of lines you move up and the number of lines you move over. This here is your change in y. And this up here is your change in x, your rise, and your run. Now in 8th grade, we are not going to say rise over run. We are going to use the actual terminology from the graph, change in y over change in x. This basically means we're looking at the change in your y value from one point to another, and laying that over your change in your x value from one point to another. So, on a graph, you're going to also pick 2 points on that line. And use the formula, which is what? Y value 1 minus y value 2 over x value 1 minus x value 2. So, this is our origin. And we need to name the 2 points that are given to us on this line. 1, 2, 3. First point is negative 3. Then we move down, 1, 2, 3. Our first point is negative 3, negative 3. We now need to name this second point. 1, 2, negative 2, and up 1 value, positive 1. And now you can take these numbers and plug them in to this formula. So this will be my first set of points. This will be my second set of points. So I need to identify my y value from my first set. Again, your points are always listed as x on the left, y on the right. My first y value is -3 minus my second y value of 1. My first x value is -2. Sorry, my first x value is -3. Minus my second x value of -2. Now notice here on the bottom, let me write this a little darker so you can see I made a mistake that first time. So you can see here, I have minus and then the point itself. The minus sign between the two values does not take the place of the negative sign for the symbol. So if you have a negative point, you need to subtract that negative point. So, -3 minus 1. When you subtract from a negative, your number becomes more negative, and we get -4. And then we have -3 minus -2. And remember, when you have two negative symbols or two minus signs, they counteract one another, and your number will become less negative. So we have -4 over -1. Our last step is to simplify this fraction as far as it will go. Remember, when you have a negative divided by a negative, it becomes positive. So our slope is 4 over 1, or 4. And lastly, we have slope from 2 points. Again, we're going to do this exactly the same way we've been doing this. We're going to take these points and we're going to plug them in to the formula. And what's the formula again? y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Now, when you have 2 points, you should always identify which is going to be your first point and which is going to be your second point, much like we did on the table and when we pulled the points from the graph. We have 1 and 2. Remember, x is always on the left, y is always on the right. So we need to take our first y value from our first point, 9, minus our second y value from our second point, -2. Remember, the minus in this formula is separate from the actual point value. So if you are subtracting a negative value, you need to make sure you have both the subtraction and the negative value of the point. Because if you leave this out, you're just subtracting from 2, or you're just subtracting 2, which is finding the slope of a different line. Now we're going to take our first x value, which is 3, minus our second x value from our second point, which is -7. And now we just do the subtraction straight across. 9 minus -2 gives us 11. 3 minus -7 is 10. And now we simplify and label our slope. Can 11/10 be simplified any further? No. So in this case, our slope of our line is 11/10. Your slope should always be in fraction form or listed as a whole number. From our two first examples, we have 5 and 4. If it is a fraction like this, it should never be listed as a decimal. Okay, there are 3 problems here at the bottom. 1, finding slope from a table. 2, finding slope from a graph using the formula. And 3, finding the slope from 2 points, also using the formula.